All right, we're starting chapter 4. There should be a new Moodle quiz open. We're starting to talk about activities cells do. These are the chemical activities, the main chemical reactions that cells do. And first, we're going to talk about how cells get energy. So we're going to introduce the energy storage molecule of all cells, that's ATP, and talk about how cells make ATP, describe how energy is produced from cells, in particular aerobic respiration. Here we can see two pictures of runners. The top runners are sprinters, very muscular, really strong. The bottom runners are long distance runners. And you can see um, still muscular, but not like these guys up here. What's special about these guys is that they can run for long distances. And so they have to be able to withstand the energy demands. All right, so the chapter begins by talking about the ultimate source of energy for living organisms, and that's the sun. The light energy of the sun is captured by plants, which in this case are the producers. The plants store that as chemical energy, which consumers like animals like us can get. And so we can use that stored chemical energy to reproduce, to build new tissues, and then us and the plants can also be uh, release energy through decomposition. All right, so the light energy from the sun is stored as chemical energy. That's shown in the two pictures on the right. That chemical energy can then be converted into kinetic energy. So it can be used for movement, but it could also be used for growth and development and things like that. The series of chemical reactions that occur in cells are referred to as metabolism. And metabolic pathways that do metabolism are the series of chemical reactions that are needed to change molecules from one form to another. Anabolic pathways take small molecules like amino acids and build them into large molecules like proteins. Catabolic reactions take large molecules like starch and break them down to release energy. So they often release very simple molecules like carbon dioxide and water. In both cases, the key thing are enzymes. These are usually protein molecules, and each enzyme has what's called an active site that binds to molecules that have a particular shape. And when it binds to them, it forces those molecules to change slightly so that they undergo a reaction. Once that happens, the products are released and the enzyme can be reused to do the same reaction over and over. Cells do this. They have an enzyme for virtually every chemical reaction that goes on inside them. What's so advantageous about enzymes is that enzymes lower the energy needed to start a reaction. So often there's kind of this hurdle that cells have to get around, otherwise the reaction won't occur. Enzymes, by binding to the substrates and then forcing them to have a slightly different shape, that lowers the energy needed to start the reaction. Okay, and so enzymes greatly reduce this energy needed to start. Okay, and so they just do this by binding and stressing the substrate so that it reacts. Enzymes, the nice thing about enzymes though is they can be, not only can they do chemical reactions, but they can be controlled. They can be turned on and turned off. Okay, so the enzyme here shown on the top left under allosteric inhibition has an active site, and it also has an allosteric site, which is a site for a regulatory molecule. When that regulatory molecule binds to the allosteric site, you can see the active site is changed so that it no longer has a shape that binds the inhibitor or substrate. So this inhibitor basically can turn the enzyme off. That's really cool. Enzymes can have an off switch. We can also have enzymes have an on switch. So some enzymes have allosteric activation. So their active site is in an inactive state until the activator binds. When the activator binds, the active site changes, so the enzyme is turned on. So this allows biochemical pathways to be turned on and off. And usually cells have a bunch of enzymes that are located together so that they can change an initial substrate through a series of changes before it gets to the final end product. So this is a biochemical pathway or a metabolic pathway. Okay, so the main catabolic pathways we're going to talk about are pathways that make ATP. All cells make ATP, and there's several ways to do it. You can do it through photosynthesis, you can do it through aerobic respiration, and anaerobic respiration. These are three different pathways, one, two, three, and they each have multiple steps. But in all cases, they make this ATP, adenosine triphosphate. They do this by sticking a phosphate molecule on adenosine diphosphate, and that stores energy, quite a nice big chunk of energy that can then be released. Um, this is short-term storage. Fats and carbohydrates are better at long-term storage, but all cells use this short-term storage. Okay, for long-term, they're going to use fats and particularly carbohydrates. Okay, the breakdown of those carbohydrates is, we refer to that as cellular respiration because and often aerobic respiration because it occurs with water. Cellular respiration is a series of enzymes that are going to oxidize the sugar molecule by combining it with oxygen and then turning it into those products to ATP. These aerobic pathways include glycolysis, oxidation of pyruvate, the citric acid cycle, and electron transport. The last two steps require oxygen, and that's where most of the ATP is made. The first steps occur in the cytoplasm and only make a little bit of ATP. So this is why oxygen is so important for our cells. So the first step, glycolysis, occurs in all cells. It's actually 10 chemical reactions, 10 enzymes that splits glucose and releases a little ATP. The final end product is pyruvate, and pyruvate then has to be oxidized so it can enter the next steps. This happens as pyruvate is entering the mitochondria, okay, because glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm, and it's going to cleave off one carbon dioxide from pyruvate so that it makes this acetyl-CoA. Okay, then this pathway goes into the citric acid cycle in the mitochondria. Here, another 9 chemical reactions occur that require 9 enzymes. Okay, the citric acid cycle takes hydrogen ions and electrons from that were on the pyruvate, and it attaches them to energy carriers that are then going to be used in the next step. And this makes a little bit of ATP. Okay, we don't have to know these intermediates or all the enzymes, but they are known, and we know they occur in the mitochondria. The next step also occurs in the mitochondria at the inner membrane. It's another 9 chemical reactions with 9 enzymes or cofactors, and this moves electrons and hydrogen ions across the membrane and allows them to diffuse back to make ATP. This makes the majority of ATP. Okay, so the summary of this is glycolysis and happens in the cytoplasm. It produces pyruvate and a little ATP. This then enters the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle. Okay, that makes a lot of these electron carriers and hydrogen ion carriers, NADH and FADH. These enter electron transport and make most of the ATP, 32 out of the 36 made per glucose molecule. So, aerobic metabolism. All eukaryotes do this. They all do it primarily in their mitochondria. This is 4 metabolic pathways. And at the end, it produces 36 ATP from 1 glucose molecule, 6 carbon dioxides, and 6 water. This is the most efficient way for cells to make energy. It produces non-toxic waste products. It's very fast. It's very efficient. Okay. There are other ways to do this if there's no oxygen. So next time we're going to talk about if there's no oxygen, and we'll talk about how cells do it then.